Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a bloom effect action inside of Photoshop. If you want to follow along, I have included all the images that I use in a link in the description of this video. I've also included the final action that we create in case you want to just dissect that. So go ahead, download that, and then let's dive into Photoshop. All right, so let's go to File, Open, and in the Assets folder, I'm going to go ahead and open the first and second file. And let's go to our first file here, and this is what we're going to use to create our action. And what I want to do is create a bloom action. So a bloom is an effect where your lights are basically blurred and then put on screen on top of your image, and it creates kind of a glowing effect. So let's go ahead and open our actions panel, which is the first one up here, and you're going to see your default actions, and then here you have a few options. You can load some other actions here, and we can also create a new set, which is a folder or a new action. Button mode basically puts all of your actions as buttons, which you can just click. So let's go back, turn off button mode, and make a new set, and we're going to call this tutorial actions. And then with tutorial actions selected, I'm going to go to new action. That'll default my set to tutorial actions, and we're going to call this bloom effect no selection. And here you can assign a shortcut to your action. You can also give it a color. We're not going to do that for either of these. And let's hit record. Now, one thing that's important when you're building an action is to not do anything in the canvas with your mouse, because generally Photoshop is not going to record that action. So for example, using a lasso to make a selection is not something that an action will support. And also when you're selecting layers inside of your action, realize that the name of the layer is important. So in certain scenarios, you're going to want to select your layer by selecting previous or selecting back layer rather than clicking on it, which will select it by name. Okay, so first, let's go ahead and make a new layer via copy. That's Command J on your keyboard, and that'll make a copy of our layer here. And then I want to isolate just the highlights. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, and do a curve. And here, if I bring the bottom of the curve to the right, that's going to isolate just my highlights. I want this pretty slim, so just those highlights there, and hit OK. Next, I want to turn these to black and white. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Black and White. I do want to maximize the amount of white here, so I'm just going to set all these to about 125%. Because I want this to work on any image, I'm going to do it to every color there, and then hit OK. Next, I want to select just the white. If I go to my channels, hold down Command and click on the RGB thumbnail, that'll select my whites. You can go back to layers here, and here I'm going to do layer, new, and then create a new layer. And here I'm going to name my layer something that I know I will never have that layer inside my document. So I'm going to call this bloom effect temp, and then hit OK. All right, and then I want to fill my selection with white. So I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, put this on white, and then hit OK. All right, next I'm going to go to Select, Deselect, and then I need to select this layer 1. However, if I click on it, it will select layer 1 regardless of where it is in my Photoshop document. And it's very likely, if you've been working on a Photoshop document, that you already have a layer 1. This might be a different layer number. So rather than clicking on it, I'm going to hold down Option and use my back bracket. And what that's going to do is select the backward layer. So now I know that it's always going to select the right layer. I'm going to click on delete layer, hit yes, and then do option forward bracket to select forward layer so that I'm selecting my bloom effect temp layer again. All right, next I'm going to make some copies of this with Command J, and I'm going to do that a few times until I have all the way up to copy 5. And now what I'm going to do is blur all these progressively more to create a blooming glow. So here I can click on this because there's not going to be another layer in my document with the name bloom effect temp copy or copy 2 and so forth. So I can just go ahead and select that layer, go up to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. We're going to start this with, let's do 10 pixels. No, let's start with 20 pixels. And then for number 2 here, I'm going to select that layer, go back to Gaussian blur. And a shortcut here is if you go to Gaussian blur here while holding down option, it'll bring up that filter with your latest setting. So now I can just double this to 40, select my next layer, hold down option, go to 80, and I'm just doubling this each time. 160. And then we'll do 300. Okay, so now I have all my blurs. The next thing I want to do is I want to select all the layers through to layer 2. I'm going to do that by holding shift, selecting all of them, and then doing Command E to merge them all. I'm going to call this color bloom. I'm going to call this one white bloom. And then I'm going to call this one pin bloom. Now from this point forward, I don't want to select these layers using my mouse anymore. And the reason why is if I run this action on a document more than once, I will already have these layers in my document. So here I'm going to select my layers using option and then bracket up again. So now I have color bloom selected. I want to go to image adjustments, hue saturation. We're going to give this a color. So I want to turn on colorize, set this to -50, set my saturation to 100. And then here you can select the color. I'm going to select this to a nice golden color and then hit OK. Next, I want to select this and put it on screen blend mode. Then I want to backward select with option back bracket, and I want to set this white bloom to 50% opacity. So I can do that by hitting 5 on my keyboard, and then option back bracket one more time, and I'll also set this one to 50%. And then in order to select all 3 of these, I can add shift to my option forward bracket, and that'll select as it's moving up those layers. So now I have all 3 selected. I'm going to do Command G to group them, and we're going to call this group bloom effect. And then I'm going to stop recording. So there you go. You can see everything that we've done in this bloom effect, and let's go ahead and test it. So to test it, I'm going to throw this away, select my bloom effect, and then hit the play button. And that's how you run an action. And you can see it's running, and now we have our bloom effect with our color bloom, white bloom, and our pin bloom. I can turn these off if I don't want it to be as strong, and I can obviously use a hue saturation to change the color bloom. So now let's go ahead and test this on a very different image and see what kind of results we get. So I'm going to hit the play button, and you can see it's a very subtle result. And the reason why is this image is so much darker than our previous image. So this is where we're going to make some adjustments to our action. Let's go ahead, throw this away, and I'm going to open this up. And the first thing is we want to control this curve because it's going to be different based on which image we're running it. So in order to allow for user control, you're going to click on this here. And what that does is when it gets to that step, the dialog turns on for the user. So if I turn this on and now run my action, when it gets to the curve, it's going to stop at that dialog. And here I can adjust how much of my highlights are going to be in the bloom effect. And you can see this now has a much cooler looking effect. However, there's one other thing I do want to control, and that is the color, right? Because here we're using a warm gold color, but in reality, this should be like a pink color. So let's go ahead and throw our bloom effect away one more time. And let's go down to our hue saturation right here, hue saturation. And let's turn the dialog on that on as well. And now we're going to hit play. Here we're going to allow to adjust our curve. And then when it gets to this step, we can adjust our color as well. And now we have a much cooler looking bloom effect. However, what if I was going to give this action to someone else? They may get to that hue saturation step and not know what they need to do. So here is where we're going to add a few other things into our action. So we're going to select layer via copy, and right after that I want to add a stop. So insert stop, and here we're going to say adjust curve, or let's say in next step, adjust curve to the highlights you want to bloom. And then make sure you turn on this allow continue, otherwise the action will simply stop at that step. Okay, so that's there, and then right before our hue saturation, we're going to add another one. And this one will say, in the next step, slide the hue slider to your desired bloom color. And here again, we want to make sure we allow continue. Okay, so let's throw this away and let's try running our action one more time. So in the next step, adjust curve to the highlights you want to bloom. Okay. In the next step, slide the hue slider to your desired bloom color. So there you go. We now have a bloom effect where we have that control. Okay, one other thing I want to show you here is conditionals. So let's go back to our original bloom effect. And here I'm going to throw this away. And what I want to do here is I want to bloom it, but I only want to bloom her. I don't want to bloom the ground. So before I run my bloom action, I'm going to have a selection. So this one we called bloom effect no selection. Let's go ahead and right mouse click, actually select that action, go here and say duplicate. And here I'm going to double click on this and I'm going to change the name to with selection. So now let's go ahead and make a selection, and I'm not recording any action here because I want this action to run when I already have a selection. So let's go to select subject. Okay, so now we're going to have a selection when we start. I'm going to hit the record button, and the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and make a copy of the layer, but then I'm going to invert my selection and then fill this with black. And then deselect. And I want all that to happen before the curve. So let's hit stop. So That is duplicate current layer, inverse, fill with black, and set selection to none. We're going to drag all these up to right before the stop step. So let's go ahead and throw away this original layer via copy. And let's go ahead and throw this away. And let's do a quick test. So we're going to select subject. Now we have a selection. And let's go ahead and run this action and see how it does. Okay, continue. Okay. Continue. Okay. All right, so as you can see, it's done the bloom effect, but it's taken into account that we already had a selection. So now I have two actions, one with no selection and one with a selection. So let's go up here and create a new action, and we're going to call this bloom effect master. I'm going to hit record and then just hit stop. And I put it in the wrong place. Let me drag it down to my tutorial actions there. And really all this is going to do is it's going to run one of these two depending on whether we have a selection or not. So here, let's go to our little contextual menu and insert conditional. And here, if current document has a selection, then play bloom effect with selection, else play action bloom effect no selection. So now this bloom action will run on any image whether I have a selection or not. So here I don't have a selection. Let me go ahead and run that action, and you can see it's proceeding with the effect. Nicely. Now, what if I do have a selection? Well, let's go ahead and paint a selection of this element here. That's all I want to bloom in this scenario. And then I'm going to hit my play button. And you can see it got rid of our background as a first step. And I can still adjust this. And now you can see it has created the bloom effect, but it's only done it on this element. So those are all the basics of setting up an action, also how you can use the insert stop and insert conditional. Now, insert menu item allows you to insert a menu item. So for example, if I wanted to insert a curve, I could do that by going insert menu item and then selecting the curve. The only problem with this, in my opinion, is that it has no preset. Whereas when I recorded the curve and added the dialogue, it has a preset that's going to work for a lot of images. So I prefer just recording the menu item with the settings that you want and then adding a little dialog box to it. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this away. Okay, so now that we have our action, let's go ahead and test it out with a couple other images. I'm going to open 3, 4, and 5 here. And let's go ahead and run it without any selection. So I'm going to select our master, hit play. And maybe I want just that. I'm going to make this kind of a blue color. All right, and you can see there's our before and after, pretty cool look. Let's try it on this one. And on this one, maybe I do want a selection. So I'm going to go ahead and with my lasso tool, just kind of select this light area here. And then run the action. And there you can see it's now bloomed just that area. And for this one, let's do it without a selection. here, I definitely need to adjust my curve quite a bit. A little too strong. In this case, what I might do is just come in here and turn off these and just leave that color bloom and maybe take the amount down a bit. But there you can see how we've now created this action. We've created conditional, and we can just run this bloom effect master on any image, whether we have or don't have a selection. And it should also work even if you have other layers in here. So let's go ahead now and make a copy of this layer, put it above our bloom effects. Let's just make sure this works, even if we have some other layers in here. And you can see it's now created another set of bloom effects, even though there was already layers in this file. So our action works regardless of whether our Photoshop document has layers or not. Okay. So there you have it. That's how you create an action in Photoshop and how you can create a conditional action as well. Hopefully through the course of this, you learned some tips, tricks, and techniques that you can use in your own projects and also to speed up your own workflows in Photoshop. Now, if you want to download my own full set of Nucly actions, I have included a link to purchase those in the description of this video. These are actions that I've designed and that I use all the time to speed up my compositing workflow. Also, if you are interested in learning Photoshop through projects similar to this one, check out Nucly.com. I sell professional training for Photoshop, as well as professional assets, textures, Photoshop brushes, and much more. So check that out. Otherwise, here's some other tutorials to check out, and I'll see you next time.
Photoshop is daunting. It's not intuitive or user-friendly, and it keeps changing. Yet it's still the leading imaging software and has been for 2 decades. What if there was a fun, easy, collaborative, and future-proof way to Photoshop mastery? Would your imagination have a limit?
Okay. That's a little dramatic, maybe.
I was downplaying it.
Imagination has a limit.
Okay. I mean,
You left so much out.
I covered the basics like fun, collaborative.
You didn't even mention the recipe-based courses that people have said 10 times their Photoshop skills in 1/10 the time.
True, but don't you feel like that's a little braggy?
And that people get updates on the courses every time Adobe releases a new feature.
Which is basically every week at this point.
Or the 2,500 professional textures, assets, brushes, and tools that come with it.
It's actually 2,579, and we're about to add more, but who's counting?
You didn't even mention my favorite part.
What's your favorite part?
The brand new community.
Okay, but what part of it?
I love the live Q&A sessions, the online message boards, forums, getting critiques from you, and I love getting to the top of the leaderboard.
Well, you would.
Yeah. And you didn't even mention it or where to get it.
True. To get the Nucly Academy, click on the link. How's that?